Hello, and welcome to yet another exciting episode of Such a Nightmare, Conversations about Horror. As is the case for every episode, I am Katherine Troyer, and I am so excited that once again I get to be joined by Anthony Tresca.
Hello there!
This is a podcast devoted to thoughtful discussions about that fine line between the horrific and the horrible. Each episode looks at a specific horror text that is, for better or worse, giving us nightmares.
And we are so excited to have you join us today for our episode over 2013's reboot/remake of Evil Dead.
Often, this is where I begin by saying "yay," but I don't know if I want to say "yay" about this film. So for those of you that have chosen this as the very first episode that you're going to listen to, we've been working our way through the Evil Dead franchise and relishing the fact that each one of the original 3 films is an experience unto itself, right? Like, it's just a completely different beast. Certainly, this remake adaptation, whatever you want to call it, reboot, is also a creature of its own device. I'm just not sure it's a creature that should have been left alive.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. I said this right before we started recording, but I said that I was probably not going to be super favorable or super nice when recording this episode, because this movie made me very angry watching it.
So what did you end up giving it in terms of your...
I gave it 1.5 stars.
Oh, that's
out
more
of 5.
than I thought. That's more than I thought you would, based on how vehemently you seem to...
Well, there's a couple things that I really do admire and respect about this movie. Like, it still is dedicated to not really using a lot of CGI. They say the director has talked about how they don't use CGI, and so they had a 70-day grueling shoot in which they had to painstakingly work out everything. That is great, obviously. And I didn't know that. I didn't realize that while watching it, but that does make me respect a lot lot of it a little bit.
So how
more.
did they not use any CGI for the makeup jobs?
That is what the director is claiming. They say that they're using, it was totally, everything is, they didn't use CG.
Well, obviously they had to use a little, right? Because the thing that comes out of the woman's mouth, when it's the branch, that was very clearly a computer generated image. So
except for touch-ups. Yeah, no, they didn't do.
Okay.
Sorry. That is officially what the director is claiming. They only did CG for touch-ups. So
okay. Well, certainly I will say that one of the scenes that I think was rather beautiful, actually, because of the lack of CGI, was the blood rain scene. Right?
I was gonna say the same thing. I was getting to that.
Yeah.
That's the other. The climax is excellent. In fact.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and I don't know what it says about me that some of my favorite scenes in movies are the ones where I know that they went through an unholy amount of fake blood, like in Cabin in the Woods, when they're in the elevator room, right, and there's just blood everywhere, or Nightmare
on Elm Street when they rotate the room and all the blood is everywhere. Exactly,
The Shining, right, when the blood flows down the hall.
Yes.
I just really get behind those. So yeah, they're and that couldn't have been as effective if they had CGI'd that, right?
No.
It wouldn't have felt as visceral. What else did you like about this film?
Well, we actually just ended everything that I like. I like that their dedication to not using any CGI, and I liked the climax in the blood rain. I thought that was about the only time that the movie, I think, really, really worked for me. And it worked for the entire sequence. I thought that seeing Mia have to, figure out how, in non-demon-possessed form, figure out how to take down this creature was really, really, really well done, really exciting. I thought it was equal parts just disturbing, but also just a little bit yay! Look at what she's having to do. It was fun. It was the first time in the movie that I was having fun.
Which is unfortunate, because I think if we can identify one of the key commonalities amongst all Evil Dead franchise, it should be audience fun, right? Like, it should be you having an enjoyable time.
Which is what hits upon my biggest problem with this movie. It's that the elements that the filmmakers and the people who are involved in production have identified as being the most important parts of Evil Dead to try to translate and adapt in this reboot remake are not what I think are the most important parts of the Evil Dead franchise at all. And frankly, I think that the elements and that they do think are the most important are actually really not important at all. Like this obsession with just like, it's a gore fest with body horror galore is just unnecessary.
I think you're absolutely correct. And I want to put a pin in that, because I think that's where we're going to spend the majority of our episode. So
consider that my thesis statement, and then we will we'll come back to that.
Yeah, because I do want to say there was one and a half other things that I appreciated about this film. I did appreciate if this was going to be part of the franchise in a way that I, wanted to include it as part of the franchise. I did appreciate having a female character. Because, we've talked extensively about both the strengths and challenges of having Ash as this sometimes very masculine, sometimes not very masculine figure. And so as what can we do to contribute to the conversation of the Evil Dead franchise, I think having a female lead, it was one of the ways, right?
For sure. It was interesting, although it was a little weird to me, because I wasn't anticipating Mia being the final girl. In that when she was revealed to be the final girl in that final scene, it was kind of shocking to me, because they hadn't really set her up as being the final. They didn't do any of the legwork to make that happen.
So, as we have seen, actually, in one of the few ways in which I think this film is accidentally true to the Evil Dead franchise, the film is very confused about what it wants from its primary character, right? Just like with Ash, where is he the hunky male lead, or is he the accidental survivor? It depends. I think you're right that this film, again, very problematically so, does manage to stay consistent of the is this victim or final girl? Is this the one who needs to be punished or the one who will triumph? Right. And I think that you're right, that the film needed to do a lot more work to get us there. And I think that the fact that we get to that point of her being a final girl only after, creepily, her brother dresses her in a dress that, why'd she have that pretty dress with her during her detox time? Right? Anyway, there are definitely problems with that, which is why that's only a 0.5 thing that I like. The one thing, though, that I want to mention, and this is where we'll get in our sort of moment of scholarship, is that I do think that there was something fascinating about this idea of using the possession narrative as a framework for thinking about detox, addiction, and withdrawals. Particularly, not so much the idea that addiction is like a demon, because that's not even remotely new, but more the way that this film played with the concept of pain. So one of my favorite scholars, her name is Elaine Scarry, and it's only a little bit because her last name is Scarry. And she has a book called The Body in Pain. And I just want to read this passage because I think that this is what the film could have been if it had just been a little bit more. So she says, "Pain begins by being not oneself and ends by having eliminated all that is not itself. At first occurring only as a appalling but limited internal fact, it eventually occupies the entire body and spills out into the realm beyond the body, takes over all that is inside and outside, makes the two obscenely indistinguishable, and systematically destroys anything like language or world extension that is alien to itself and threatening to its claims. Terrifying for its narrowness, it nevertheless exhausts and displaces all else until it seems to become the single, broad, and omnipresent fact of existence. I think that this is what the Evil Dead film could have been, right? And we see touches of it. I think that, this idea of, is Mia haunted by something that's outside her or inside her? Yes.
Yeah.
Is this thing that is happening, why does it happen to everyone else? Because pain consumes everything else. So I think that from this framework of understanding sort of trauma studies, and this perspective of pain and its effects and world making, and more specifically world breaking, I think that sort of way in which the Evil Dead movie is touching on that was the part that worked the best for me.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also thought that was at least an interesting idea, which, again, I wish they had committed to that a little bit more, because for a large portion of, at least the second act, that is just not even. That they sidelined all of that.
Absolutely.
And
I don't think they returned to it until the moment that you and I agree is the best moment, which is the bloodbath scene.
That's exactly right. I agree 100%. They, introduce it, and they're like, this is what our movie is going to be about. And you're like, oh, okay, you're doing this in a really ham-fisted way, because the script is so awful, and the words they're having all of the actors say is just abysmal. I cannot believe someone got paid to write this dialogue. And they introduce it, and then the entire second act, the second act is basically just yeah, but forget about all that. It's just going to be gore fest. And then the climax, they return to it and they remember what the movie is about, and it's really good. I just wish that that climax had been, we could just take that climax and then put it with a movie that makes it make sense and have that be a really rewarding and earned climax. Whereas right now it's oh, this climax is the only good scene. It's not earned so much as it just is good in spite of the rest of the movie that it's in.
Yes. Yeah, it almost makes you feel like the filmmakers came up with that scene and they were like, yes, okay, let's get there, right? But then instead of actually getting there, it was they said, okay, I want you to write the movie, and then I'm just going to insert my nugget of goldenness, and we'll just make it fit. I don't know, there was just, you're right, such a disconnect.
Because I think, and I honestly, I would not be surprised if that's true, because the only thing you need to get into that scene is an idea of what the themes are, and you're this is how it'll end. So I would not be surprised if they built the movie backwards, because you're right, it feels there's such a blatant disconnect from this final scene and the really astute sense of the source of horror is made explicitly clear. It is incredibly well acted. The dialogue is a lot better when it's used in this final scene than everything else in the movie, and it all works. And so I guess that is our kind of that is the section of the film where I'm I understand what you are going for. And I know, and that's what I think makes it frustrating, because you're I know you can do it too, because you do. This scene is amazing. It's a great scene. It's just a shame that nothing else in the film comes even remotely close to that final scene.
And I think the key word, because now we're going to take the pen out of your thesis, right, is this word disconnect. The film just has such a disconnect from itself and from the larger Evil Dead franchise that I have a feeling that you and I, neither of us would have quite... We would still not think this was a good film, but we wouldn't be so vehemently upset by it if it wasn't clinging to the label of Evil Dead.
Yeah, because I agree. While I was watching this, I was thinking about the same thing, because my mind was wandering, because I didn't think this film was very interesting. I was if this wasn't connected to the Evil Dead at all, and it was just a generic horror movie, I think it would be, I would come away from it and I'd be yeah, that was a bad, boring horror movie. But at least the end was pretty cool. And I was oh, okay, I guess it's probably a 2.5. It's passable horror fare. Because it's just kind of a, forgettable horror movie, but it is a atrocious Evil Dead movie.
So let's talk about that. Okay. Adaptation studies, talks a lot about the fidelity, right? And that perhaps more important than clinging to, but his scarf was blue in the book, why is it not blue in the movie, is, the fidelity or the spirit or the essence of a text. And you and I have talked recently about the fact that you've begun to have some sort of realizations about the types of adaptations that you like, and that you actually like adaptations oftentimes that depart significantly enough that it feels like it's a text in its own right, rather than sort of like piggybacking on this other text. So in theory, based on just that sort of explanation,
which I do agree with. That is the type of adaptation I'm finding myself more drawn to. Stay tuned for our episode on The Shinings for more.
Yay! I'm curious to know what for you it is about the Evil Dead film that is breaking so fully with this issue of the fidelity of the spirit of the franchise, that you can't forgive it for quote attempting maybe to be its own text.
I think it's because it is so blatantly piggybacking off of the originals, and it is forcing you to remember that it is an Evil Dead movie, and that it is trying to be, and that is the difference, and what doesn't allow itself to be its own thing and carve out its own niche and be its own separate thing, and an adaptation that truly is an adaptation. It's its own thing separate from the originals. But I think the constant reminders and and I mean that from every sense. Like, there are so many shots, like the literal shots that are just stolen from Sam Raimi, but done in a less effective manner. Like, we've got the classic shaky cam in the woods where, except it doesn't look like it's on a motorcycle this time because it's more pristine. It's more, it's the production value is clearly higher on this version. Mm-hmm. They've got that same around the world shot, except weirdly enough, it doesn't even commit to it. It does half of it, and then there's a cut, and then it goes to just a normal shot. And there are just moments of that throughout where it's like visually, in what the camera is doing, reminding you of what the original films are, and stealing those things from the first. The script, the plot is basically the same. It's basically the same as the original, so it's not even like trying to differentiate itself in that manner. And just, again, like a lot of the imagery is the same. And so you're like, you're not your own thing. This is not an adaptation. This is your version of the original.
As you were talking and talking about sort of the taking something 75% of the way, right, and then not carrying it through. It makes me think about the fact that there is this very incorrect assumption that something can be better if you can smooth out all of the rough edges of the original. And yet the result is, right, is that whereas as something that is rough around the edges has texture, or at least the potential for texture, something that's been smoothed out, I mean, it's right, it's slick. There's like no way to hook yourself in. And so I think you're right that one of the ways that this film fails is that you can tell in all of the Evil Deads, especially 1 and 2, that Raimi was like, screw it. Let's see what happens. It's going to fail, but let's do it anyway. And of course, then it doesn't fail, right? But like, he's like, let's get on a motorcycle and let's see what happens when I do it that way. Whereas this film seemed to it was like they had people, and they probably did, actually, in the production that like their job was to be risk calculators, right? Like, okay, well, if you do this, that's going to cost you X amount of money and time. I don't know if that risk is worth the amount of resources. So maybe we just do a partial risk. And it felt sanitized in a way that a film that has a scene that can literally be called a blood shower scene should not feel sanitized.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with you 100%, because I think it is able. This film, as I said, clearly has a bigger budget and is clearly trying to pay respects to the original, and because it's so blatantly like taking so many elements and trying to just do them again. But it seems to have forgotten a lot. It's taken out the heart of it because it just kind of feels soulless at this point. It feels hollow. It's like it's the same shot, but you have like perfected it so much and made it look so pristine that you have removed what made it like so interesting and compelling to watch.
I think that's a perfect explanation of what this film is lacking is that idea of heart.
And I think that goes. It's in the script. The script doesn't have heart. It's in the cinematography. The cinematography lacks heart. It's in the direction. It's certainly in the characters, and it's certainly in most of the performances.
And this is something that I think films like this are unfortunately why horror often gets a bad rap in the same way that a lot of genres get a bad rap, and that is that it's a paint by numbers approach, right? Like, and it starts with that opening scene that drives me absolutely nutters because, you know, first off, I'm okay without maybe ever seeing another horror film with a cold opening. I mean, you know, us aside, you know, the carnival scene and us aside, I don't need those anymore, maybe ever, but I certainly don't need ones that, are, if you are at all familiar with the Evil Dead franchise, are not going to be a surprise, right? Like, no one should have seen that teen girl and been like, I don't know why he's burning her. It's like, of course she's a Deadite. But my real problem is the depiction of, I don't know, the townspeople or the woods people. I don't know what they're supposed to be. But, you know, they're all without teeth, or they have physical scars, or, you know, they're clearly depicted as a lower socioeconomic class, and dirty, and you know, they're otherized. Like, it just was like, ooh, what do we know manages to be scary? People that are different. Like, it just was so gross, and not gross in a good way. And then it was just, yeah, it was like a paint by numbers. It was like, okay, well, we have to have the caring brother figure, up until the final moment where it's like, okay, well, now that we've had this beautiful, unexpected blood shower scene, let's go ahead and go back to our paint by numbers. Oh, we don't have our final jump scare. You know what I mean? And that's just so disappointing. Independent of its connection to Evil Dead, that's disappointing. But let's get back to the idea of the heart. What do you think is the heart of the Evil Dead films that is absent in this remake reboot?
I think the heart of the Evil Dead, the original Evil Dead movies, is this absurd commitment to style over all else. And it's a really specific aesthetic that they're going for, and the aesthetic is not necessarily good or realistic per se, but it doesn't matter because it's so insanely consistent throughout the entirety of the runtime that you just are like, it doesn't matter that this blood doesn't look remotely like real blood at all, because this is how all blood in this entire movie has looked so far. It's like really over the top in the manner that obviously only their lower budget could do. And so I think that is really what it is. That and Bruce Campbell so it really boils down to what I'm saying. The heart is Sam Raimi's obsession and dedication to maintaining a consistent style, and then Bruce Campbell's performance and how he fits into Sam Raimi's vision of the style.
I'm gonna take it a step further. So you said at one point you said his absurd commitment to style. I'm gonna say that it's also just the absurd commitment to absurdity.
Yes, you're right. Yes.
Because one of the things that I found so very frustrating about this film, that I didn't find at all frustrating about any of the first three Evil Deads, was the ridiculousness of what leads them to that situation. So in the remake, it really, really, really annoyed me. Like, in ways that I can't even begin to verbally express. that the one character who was the teacher with the glasses, like, it says in blood, don't read from this book aloud. And he's like, oh, I'm going to take an etching, and just happen, and then he just reads it aloud. And it's like, that is the most ridiculous thing in the world. But what upsets me is not its ridiculousness, but it's the fact that you're not acknowledging its ridiculousness. Like, in Evil Dead, the idea that a group of college-age students would happen to get together and happen to decide that a good way to spend the evening is reading from this grody book. That is ridiculous, and the entire film makes it clear it is aware that it is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, and, another difference about this remake and the original Evil Dead is that, all of them, is that in the originals, the first act is so short. There's barely first acts. It just skips straight to the inciting incident, and it's just like, let's get into the second act where all the fun is going to happen. Whereas with this film, it's been so long on the first act, setting up this events, because I think it's hard. It's frustrating to me that this movie is so obsessed with, like, making it the situation realistic. It seems like it's like trying to like bring some realism into this, and like, even though we're gonna do this fantastical, insane thing, we've got to make it make sense, and which is stripping the original Evil Dead. It's like that. It strips what the original Evil Dead is all about, which, like, is what you said, absurd, a commitment to absurdity, and it doesn't need to make sense. Making sense and it all tracking is not important, or is not necessary to to being entertained and to the fun of the films.
Yes.
The original trilogy.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. This film, the 2013 film, is struggling with a desire to do what, quote, good filmmaking narrative building does, and that is to make everything make logical sense and have a clear, like, sort of causal relationship with the just implausibility of the scenario and world that is Evil Dead. So to go back to the book example, in the Evil Dead Raimi films, I mean, that book is so goobery looking, right? Yeah. I mean, it just, like, you look at it and you're like, of course you shouldn't read that book. But the 2013 film, made the book, like, they tried to make it really dirty and, like, covered in, like, real blood. And it, like, first off, who is going to read a book covered in someone else's blood? Like, so, like, it takes, but then also, like, it takes this thing that is just so obviously goofy, and in the original, and just makes it, and then we have to, like, sit through that, right? Like, we have to sit through this world that is trying to convince us that this is a plausible action that this, quote, real character would take.
Yeah, and I think, maybe this movie would have been more watchable if I had cared at all about a single character in this movie. But every character is just so shallow and so insanely vapid and boring. And I just don't care about any of them at all.
And the way that they try to get you to care about the characters is so weird to me. Like, there's this whole, tension between the Mia and her brother about, the mom, but it's like, we never saw them good, so we don't care about them broken. Or the one that drives me absolutely, like, bonkers is the nurse character. I'm sorry. My mom is an RN. My stepdad is an LPN. I believe that nurses do 90% of the work that doctors take credit for. Like, but what nurse is going to think that she has the ability to detox someone because she'll, quote, do the same things they do in the hospital? I don't think so, lady. First off, where did you get the drugs, right? Like, second, I don't think so, lady. Like, I don't see IV bags. I don't see, like, but the film tries so hard to be like, oh no, this makes logical sense because she's an RN and because, she's thought this plan through. And it's like the most ridiculous plan ever. So you're right. I think this film keeps trying so hard to make us see the characters as relatable, to make us see the situation as plausible. And I mean, you can't do that in a franchise that culminates with him going back to medieval times. Like, you just can't do that.
Exactly. And it's really disappointing to watch them try to do that. Because what they have clearly identified, and I suppose semi-successfully done and captured about the original, is the over-the-top gore. However, now, since that is the only element that they have captured from the original, it just feels like gore for gore's sake. It's over-the-top, body horror, disgustingville, but you don't really care about anything that's going on, so it's just like, that's it. That's where it stopped. It's just like, yes, they have that. Yes. That is an element in the film.
So the scene where she's sawing at herself in the bathroom, and that whole bathroom scene, right? It was gross. It was certainly disturbing. But you're right. In a film that has promised us this weird, like, you know, we're going to be as close to reality as possible by giving you characters that have clear reasons for actions and things like that. You can't then say, but we're also going to have gore that is at an unrealistic level, right?
Yeah.
You have to either be absurd from start to finish, or you can't be absurd about just the random things you pick and choose.
Yeah. Because it's frustrating that is what they think is the most important part about the Evil Dead movies, and that's what they think is why everybody likes the original, is just because it's so gory. I mean, yeah, it is a little bit. It is. But it's the gore in conjunction with how over the top everything else in this world is. How over the top every other character is. It only makes sense that Bruce Campbell, who is, probably, Ash is probably a crazy person, for sure. Yeah. If you've met Ash in the real world, he is a crazy person.
Right, and the TV show plays with that nonstop. Yeah.
Well, which I'm excited. I am excited to see that, because in this movie, when you see all the characters do that, it just doesn't make sense, because you're like, I don't know if they would do that. But when Ash cuts his own hand off, you're like, yeah, no, he would do that. This guy is unhinged and crazy to the core. Like, this guy is not connected to the real world at all. He is not thinking about the consequences or how much it's going to hurt. He's just doing to do.
Yes, and the title of the TV show, right, Ash versus Evil Dead, I think gets to what you said is part of the heart, and that is the 2013 film seems to think that what we are most drawn to is the mythos of this world, this book, and the Deadites. Yes. But really, what we're most interested in is, what will Ash do next when put into yet another impossibly ridiculous situation that just happens to involve this book that he can't read? And that's not Mia, as good of a performance as I think the actress did at various moments in the film.
She is one of the actresses who I am talking about, who I don't think this is her fault. I think she does do as good of a job as she can with what she's given.
And like I said, it's super weird watching this film now after having seen some of Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, which is all about like her singing and having, like happy love moments. So that kind of threw me for a loop, which again is not her fault. But Mia is not a strong enough character, or a quirky enough character, or a interesting enough character for me to want to follow her and see what happens.
And I think we'll just extend that to everything. Nothing about this film is quirky or interesting enough for me to want to pay attention or follow it through.
And the few times that they try to introduce it, it falls so flat. Like, what is up with the dog's name? Who names their dog Grandfather? Like, I'm sure that was supposed to be like a haha, it's so funny, but you can't do that if you haven't committed 150%, because that's how much Campbell and Raimi committed to the absurdity, right? If you can't go above 100%, turn it in the terms of Spinal Tap to 11, then you might as well go home.
And thus, I think, is really the biggest problem. Like, this is hitting on, like, the big problem of this film, is that as an adaptation, it fails. Because it's not different enough from the original to warrant this existing. And if you want to just, like, straight remake it, they failed to capture the spirit of the original. And then if you don't view it as an adaptation, it just fails as a horror movie because it's not interesting or consistent enough.
And it's uninspired.
And it feels very uninspired. So it fails as an adaptation, it fails as a remake, and it fails as a regular horror movie. Which, I mean, that just amounts to a total failure, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's really intense, but an accurate description. I know at one time they were hoping that this would be the beginning of the reboot of a franchise. Do you know?
They announced originally that a sequel to this was in the works, but then Sam Raimi announced that he was going to be doing Evil Dead 4, and then the original director of this Evil Dead, the 2013, is just saying that they don't really have anything officially to do. And now it seems like, as of June 2020, that someone else, Lee Cronin, is coming in to write and direct a movie called Evil Dead Rise, which doesn't appear to be connected to the 2013 Evil Dead. It seems to be more connected to the others. Although everything seems really tentative right now and in flux.
I mean, I wish that people would learn the lesson that claiming the name of something is not the same as claiming the essence of what makes it good. Even sequels have proven that, right? Like immediate sequels with the entire cast, same cast, like in The Babysitter 2. And I just, there's something. Evil Dead 1, 2, and 3, even though we didn't like them all to the same degrees, are essentially lightning in a bottle. And the truth is that you can't replicate lightning in a bottle. And if you're going to, you certainly can't remove the lightning and expect it to still be electrifying. We will eventually return back to Ash vs. Evil Dead, but since it's 3 seasons, it's taking us a little bit longer to, in my case, rewatch, and in Anthony's case, be introduced to the splendor that is the TV show. So we are going to return to our regularly scheduled program of picking whatever so moves us. So we're going to palate cleanse from a film that made us sad to a film that continues to delight decades after the fact, and that is
1984's A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yay! The film that began production on the day that I was born. So excited. I can't wait to have that conversation, and in the meantime,
be sure to follow our social medias, which are in the description of this podcast. Leave us a review and a like wherever you get your podcast from, and as always, share us with your friends. Hope you have a good day. Thanks for listening.